Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the interview room. We got a great show ahead for you. Put your seatbelts on. They're playing my song. We want to welcome everybody from around the world. England, Australia, Canada. We've even had Israel in the house. Wow. Great to see everybody. We'll give it a couple of minutes to build up here. We've got a really exciting show for you. I've got the best of the best. Miss Maud, welcome from Canada. Brazil's in the house, Irene. Texas is in the house. Don't you just love that music? It's nuts. Absolutely nuts. Ireland's in the house. Iceland's in the house. Lisa from upstate New York. LA. New Orleans. Melissa from West Virginia. Hello from Switzerland, Rebecca. Oklahoma, going there in a couple of weeks. California, France, Chantel 37. Maine, Scotland, Liz. Australia's in the house. Colorado, SoCal. Jerry from Arkansas, Spokane, Washington with Maggie. Thank you all for being here with us this evening. We are so grateful that you trust the interview room. Well, tonight, let me tell you, I've got some great friends, and I'm going to bring them in right now. I've got Greg Cooper, I've got Tom, and of course, Dean. And I'm going to put Tom up in the top here for everybody. And I'm going to, with Dean and I down here on the bottom. And those of you that do not know Mr. Greg Cooper and Dean Jackson and Tom McHoes, Greg was the former FBI BAU chief many years ago from back in his day in the behavior science unit. And of course, Dean is the co-founder, the deputy executive director of the Cold Case Foundation. And he was also a former coroner kind of guy back in his time where he would hang around with those who had no personality, the dead people. And then, of course, Mr. Tom McHoes, an investigative journalist, good friend, and he and Greg and the Cold Case Foundation, they have written a book. And that's going to be part of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And then, of course, we're going to shift gears because these guys are some of the brightest minds out there, in my opinion. And so I'm going to poke them a little bit about this guy in New York City and pull some of that stuff out of Greg and thereabouts. But so, Tom, we'll start with you in the upper left-hand corner. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself. As you can see, they're from around the world. And what in the world are you doing hanging out with these guys?
Well, they invited me, and it sounded like a party. So, here I am. I'm always up for a good party. But no, I used to be an investigative reporter / journalist back in the Sacramento area, back in the 90s, a place called Roseville, Press Tribune there. And then a few years into it, I moved out to Utah, and I worked for the Daily Herald in Provo, which is where I ran across Greg. He had just come from the FBI and was a police chief there in Provo, and we had a chance to get to know one another and some great times. Didn't start off so great. We can talk about that later, but we became friends later on, and I've learned a lot from him. But as we've moved on through the years, I've had a chance to learn these amazing techniques, skills that these gentlemen have to offer to help solve these many which are heartbreaking cases, for these families. And I've had a chance to just be a small part of that and help publicize what they do and how they do it. And it's just been an honor and a pleasure. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you on. We're grateful that you're here, and we look forward to learning from you this evening. I mean, I think it's going to be an exciting show. I really do. So you and Greg and the organization foundation gets together, and you guys end up writing this book, which is going to be out starting Tuesday.
So Tuesday. So it's actually available to order right now. It actually has been available to order for, a couple of months on Amazon. The orders will start shipping off of Amazon on Tuesday. Additionally, the book will be available on Tuesday. So really exciting. So just 2 days away. Awesome.
All right, Mr. Greg, I'm going to hold on for you just for a second because I want to hear so much. But I want to hear from Dean tonight because Dean is Mr. I don't know. He's got so much wisdom, and he just sits in the background. He's like E.F. Hutton, and when Dean starts talking, everybody starts going, wait a minute, where'd that come from? And it makes so much sense. It just always falls into place. Dean, how the heck are you? Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Oh, I'm doing really good, and it's always a privilege to be with you, Chris, and I always enjoy hanging out. We always have a great time, and whether it's in person or on the show. So been looking forward to tonight, and it's always good to be with my friends, especially tonight to have Greg and Tom on there. And it's been fun to kind of watch them go through the journey to write this book and be able to not only be a part of what they were putting together, but also to be in some of the reviews and kind of walk through it. So it's been kind of fun, and I'm excited to see this get out because I think part of the thing that we've talked about so much on the foundation is that this really is a dream that Greg has had for years, long before I think I even met him, and something that he shared with me in the early days. And as this thing has kind of come into fruition, it's been exciting to see that happen. But one of the challenges, I think, when we first started was we had all these incredibly amazing people who saw our vision and said, yeah, we want to be a part of it. But the foundation didn't really have a history, right? You're starting something from scratch, and this is 13 years ago. And so you're kind of talking about, well, what we've done in our own separate careers, we're bringing that to the table. And so this was really an opportunity to take a look at what the foundation has been doing and participating in. And we're always very quick to say, look, these cases that we get involved in, there's a multitude of people that have to be a part of it. It's not something that we come in and solve like the pros from Dover. What we do is come alongside agencies and give them resources. And I always like to say we get to participate in these cases with people. And it really is, it doesn't matter if we're looking at a 45-year-old case or a case that they just found out they're dealing with yesterday. If somebody's not in there, taking the notes, doing the interviews, getting the photographs, getting the reports, all of those things aren't happening. We don't even have a starting point. And so we're able to come alongside and work with amazing people. I think one of the things I'm amazed with across the country is the phenomenal people we have in this profession, and people that I really believe they're not doing it because they're superstars and making millions and millions of dollars. I think they're doing it because there's a call in their life. They want to see the truth. They want justice. And so it's just been fun to be a part of this process.
Well said. Well said. And we're grateful that you're here this evening because I know you're going to add a whole nother dynamic of thought process as we go forward in our conversation here. All right, Mr. Cooper, tell everybody, well, first of all, if you've never been on our channel here, one of the reasons I started this channel was Greg and I and Dean were talking back, 4 years ago, and it was like, what if we had a place where families could come and we could, talk about cases, not specific of, what's going on behind the scenes, active investigations, that we were actively and still continue to actively work with law enforcement. But what if there was a place where families could come and just kind of feel safe, get information, and maybe get some guidance and directions? And that was kind of part of the birth, the reason this channel was put together, the interview room. And because Greg and I go back a long time, I met him a couple of weekends ago, and he has taught me so much. And if you've never ever had the opportunity to watch him teach, and I think everybody in this conversation here can attest to the unbelievable gift of wisdom, knowledge, and experience combined. And when that's executed correctly and properly to a room full of homicide detectives, you start seeing things happen that normally you would not see. And then attribute that or add on top of that, his ability to lead and organize. How many experts are in the foundation right now, Greg?
Well, we've got about 160.
And now think about that. These are A-type dominant personalities, all experts within their own field. Everybody has an opinion. And Greg is sitting at the helm, and he's having to navigate with Dean, on a daily basis in the executive level, on moving things in different directions. So we're just fortunate, and you folks are fortunate tonight to be here because you're going to be able to ask them questions. And that's the other cool part about this channel, just the YouTube aspect of things, where you can actually, sit down with, folks who were there in the very beginning. I mean, your mentor was John Douglas. Didn't John bring you into the behavior science unit, Greg?
Yeah, that's right. I was one of 3 that he had selected after he just was authorized to pick up 3 more profilers. This is a number of years ago, obviously, but that was for the investigative support unit, which is the first unit that housed the profilers in a subunit, if you will, called the Criminal Investigative Analysis Program. There were 3 different programs there within the investigative support unit. And one was the profiling unit, or the Criminal Investigative Analysis Program. The other one was VICAP, Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. And then ABIS, what we referred to as ABIS, or the Arson Bombing Investigative Services Program. And John was the unit chief. So that's where I started my opportunity, at least functioning as a young FBI agent. I had been in the Bureau for about 5 years, and my whole soul interest in going to the FBI was to become a profiler. So I was just very, very fortunate to have been selected, and certainly changed the path, if you will, of my career, the rest of my life. But Chris, thank you for having us this evening, because your program is highly successful, and it's just an honor to be able to be your guest. We've worked together a long time, we've been friends for longer, and what a privilege it is to participate with you. For the audience's interest, we welcome all of you, of course, and for informational purposes anyway. Chris, you know a lot about Chris. There's probably a lot of things you don't know about him that I do know about him, but we'll keep that confidential.
Please.
But Chris also serves as the Cold Case Foundation's director for law enforcement and investigations. So thank you, Chris, for all your service to the foundation. We've been doing this for a number of years, as you've indicated. We started off with a handful of people. I think, Dean, about 5 or 6 people we started with 13 years ago. And here we are, 160 volunteers later. And they're all experts, every one of them, experts in their own right.
Yeah, and the walls can tell a whole bunch of stories in your 2 offices back behind you there, I know. Okay, so now we jump forward and we get to one of the projects that you've been wanting to do for a very long time, Greg, and you and Tom get together, and this is the product. So why the book? Why the book?
Well, the primary purpose of the book is to advertise the Cold Case Foundation and let the public know who we are, and to share with them our successes, to give them a legitimate narrative so they can make reference to and understand who we are, why we are, and how we got where we are, and to share with the public so the public has an opportunity not to just become aware of us, but rather to participate with us. And we encourage, of course, the public to purchase a copy of the book so they can get to know us and a number of the members of the Cold Case Foundation. The foundation is not just about any one individual. Our primary function is to serve law enforcement and victims' families. And our primary client are victims. Because when it comes to it, right down to it, as you consider your clientele from a business standpoint, and in law enforcement, I think sometimes we have a tendency we don't forget, but we misplace sometimes who our primary client is, and it's the victim. You take victims out of the equation, and there's no need for law enforcement agencies or a criminal justice department. So our primary function is to share with the public now through the Cold Case Foundation, and now through a publication, an opportunity to share with you some of our successes, the cases, the victims families that we've been privileged to become friends with in many cases, and participate with. I think it's really important to recognize, too, that this isn't the work of one person or 2 people. The work and success that we've experienced is a combination of many, many law enforcement agencies over many, many years, not just the last 13 years that we've been in business, but from the inception of the case, from the crime scene all the way through the courtroom. And the work, for example, these cold cases that we work, a lot of them are very old. One of the oldest ones that we share with people in the book is about 50 years old. And what a dramatic story is behind it. But recognizing that initial work that was done early on laid the foundation for the successes that we were all able to experience 45 years later. And so we can't discount that work that was done originally. In fact, we really honor those investigators that started it, did it right the first time, and you can see their level of dedication and commitment. So what a privilege it's been for Tom and I to put this book together, and to share with the public these successes and what the mission of the foundation is all about.
Well said, Tom. What do you hope to accomplish? What do you hope the reader to get out of the book?
Yeah, I appreciate that question, Chris. For me, as I work with Greg and Dean and as they said so eloquently, all the law enforcement victims' families, I had an opportunity to talk to all of these people. And the one thing that I keep coming back to, especially about Greg and the foundation, is that there's always a higher purpose, right? It's not about, hey, look at me, look at our foundation, look what we did. And in fact, I would go as far to say that none of that plays into the equation. It's always about how do we help these families, right? So I would say, you asked me, what do we hope to get out of this? What my hope is that we get a lot of readership, that people share this with other people so that we can say yes to so many more families who come, approach us, say, hey, I'm so desperate. My son, my daughter, brother, sister, they were killed or they've gone missing, and just the local police agency just doesn't have the resources or the time or any of those things that we know that our local police agencies around the country and the world sometimes struggle with. So my hope is that we're able to say, yes, yeah, we can help you to so many more families and to so many more police agencies who are desperate to solve these crimes as well, right? They don't want to just put them aside and put them in a box. And so I hope that everybody that's out there that's watching this that may be kind enough to purchase a copy of the book will share this on social media and any other medium that you might have with people, because there really is a lot of need that we're maybe not even aware of. I think, Greg, I might get this wrong, but I think what did we say, about 40% of homicide cases, missing person cases, have gone unsolved, and so there's a real need, and not for lack of effort, right? It's not for lack of effort. It's just there's just the resources, the demand. It's tough to see. So I'm hoping that we can just say yes to everybody that comes and knocks on our door, right? That we get to that point.
Well
I
said.
think too, Tom, when you talk about the people that have, died, or these homicide victims, it's easy for us to just focus on that number. But I always remind people that for every person, I mean, just think about us. If one of us got killed tomorrow, how many people that would affect? The ripple effect in a community is just unbelievable. And so I think when you start looking at the numbers of unsolved cases, and then you look at how many people, and those are just continued to pile up year after year after year. So it's a crisis. I mean, Greg likes to talk about, the pandemic that we have in this country of cold cases, and it's true. And it's not because law enforcement doesn't care, but it's because the resources, everything is stretched so thin. When you look at I always say this, I've never ever sat down with anybody in law enforcement, any administrators ever, who have ever called the foundation and said, hey, we've got this real big problem. We have more money and more resources than we really know what to do with. Have you guys got any ideas for us? It just doesn't happen. It's always the other side of the coin. We want to do more, but we don't have the funding. We want to do more, but we don't have enough people. We don't have enough time. And so, for us, part of this is coming alongside and saying, look, we know, to your point, we know we can't fix everything, but what we are looking for is a way to tell the story so that people understand. I mean, when Greg put this together, it's a 501c3 because we want people to be able to come and donate to it and give us the resources that we can do. And we've done all of this without people being paid. But the flip side of that is we've got a ton of opportunities that we've got people right now that do full-time jobs for agencies, for other places, that volunteer their time with the foundation and give us all of their overtimes, all of their extra time. And we're in a position where we're saying, look, if we can somehow flip this and bring these people in and really start making a difference, the ability that we can do as far as bringing a resource to agencies is mind-boggling, I think, really.
Yeah, well, that is a really great point. And so let's talk about a couple of things. One, Greg, let's kind of give everybody a high-level understanding of obviously not every single case that comes into the organization is going to have the result, number one, that a family or a victim, victim's family is looking for. I mean, we take an objective approach. You call it the Mayo Clinic approach to looking at situations, and sometimes folks aren't happy with results because maybe something their loved one did or et cetera, but it was the same result perhaps a law enforcement agency had come up with. So that number one. So it's not always, even though we can throw 167 experts at a particular problem, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get a specific result. We're going to follow the evidence where it goes. So tell everybody about that Mayo approach and why that is so important.
That's a great point, Chris. I think the whole strength of the organization is because we are a team of experts that work together. We're similar to the medical model for the Mayo Clinic. Somebody who has some very serious medical issues, they go to the Mayo Clinic, not because they don't have service available locally, but maybe there's been a lack of experience in certain areas and areas of specialization at that local level, medically speaking, that they want more experts attuned to be able to look at a medical case. And consequently, when you get these team of experts put together, it creates a real synthesizing effect. And it creates another mindset. It creates another brain trust as a combination of all these different personalities and all these different disciplines and experiences and training and education. We have experts ranging everywhere from forensic sciences to psychologists, obviously investigators, to FBI profilers, and just about everything in between that you can imagine. And if we don't have it, then we'll go out and get it if a particular case is calling for it. So I think the strength, as I indicated, is really in the combination or combined effort. We really focus on what we refer to as, the 4 C's. 4 different principles that we focus on as an organization and individually that are really required to solve any case, regardless of the age of the case. And that's communication, coordination, cooperation, and collaboration. And that's between agencies that are working these cases. For example, I mentioned this one case. It was about 45, 50 years old that we addressed. In fact, it's the first case that I think we write about in the book. And when you start to conduct an analysis, by the time this case is solved, 45 years later, there's been a myriad of individuals and different law enforcement agencies from the local, the state, and the federal who have worked together collectively to bring this thing to a successful conclusion. One case that I recall that I was involved in FBI, and we don't focus necessarily in this book on it, but it's a case that was solved as a result of numerous agencies that was involved in it. My role was simply to give a testimony as a profiler in the book, or rather, the case. And my testimony linked these cases together from a behavioral perspective. But exclusively, that testimony alone needed to have some context and history to it. And that's when we start looking at all the other individuals that participated in this case at different various organizations, as well as various jurisdictions from the local, the state, and federal. And so from a combined effort, we end up coming up with 2 convictions of for one individual, 2 convictions, and 2 separate death penalties on this one particular case. Same individual, same offender. None of that could have happened had we not worked together. But each of us provided something of specialization from our own background and experience that without that puzzle piece may not have ended up in such a successful conclusion. So we all provide a puzzle piece, I think, is maybe one way to put it.
Yeah, I think that is so critical because I don't know if the public really understands what takes place behind the scenes. Like, and we could use this caper right now in New York City, where, you know, there's just so many moving parts taking place. You know, we only get to see what's out, you know, the public gets to see what's out front, you know, and I know people are chomping at the bit to hear what your thought process is, you know, as we start to, you know, talk about a real life case, right? I mean, and I think the public, you know, in today's society, we are a society of instant gratification. Am I off base there by saying that? What do you guys think? Would you agree?
No, and we're probably part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that, Chris. That's, you know, I mean, we watch TV and the crimes are solved in 42 minutes, right? And then, so it's kind of there. One thing I do, I'm kind of like looking at the chat and stuff, and you know, people are bringing up some really good points, right? Okay. I think, you know, you see things like I've just seen a couple of things like, hey, every life matters, right? It doesn't matter what lifestyle they have. More people go missing than we even know. We actually have a case like that in the book where this person's remains were found like years or months, I guess months later, in the middle of a forest in Oregon, right? And nobody knew who that person was. And then it was years before they finally, you know, identified that person. And you know, as it turned out, that person had a really difficult life, and was somebody that was discarded from station to station to station. And we felt, you know, we felt privileged, you know, to be a part of that. But it does take some time, you know, it does take years, decades, months, whatever it might be. The thing that I learned, as I got to talk to people and research this book, that I was really, that I really think probably your listeners, your viewers, would be pleased to hear, is every police agency that we talked to that had to put that case in a box, it just was stuck, you know, and then they'd pull it out and try to, you know, apply maybe some modern forensics to it, and they get stuck again. But when they would finally, you know, when we'd finally get around to being a part of it, these folks, these law enforcement folks, no egos whatsoever. They just, whoever can come and help us, that's what they wanted to see. And I absolutely love that. You know, because so often you mentioned, right, you know, we got this case solved really quickly, right? And we've got these egos and the whole thing. That's kind of how it's portrayed on TV and in movies. But that is not what I've experienced in my 30 years as a journalist, at all, you know. And I think it's just important for people to see that. In fact, we have a whole chapter dedicated to it. We call it the cases that haunt, and it's why we have 160 people who volunteer their time with no benefit to them monetarily or anything. It's because it bothers you, Chris. I know, you know, you're in that boat, you know, and so I think that is just something important to call out from somebody who hasn't been in law enforcement, but has had a chance to be behind the scenes.
Well said, Tommy. Well said. So I think it's also important for folks to understand that the foundation came as a result of just looking into the environment, i.e. the United States, and saying, holy cow, what's happening out here? And then, of course, the overflow where agencies, law enforcement, we retire. And, there's these cases, you put them in a box, as Tom said, and you put it on a shelf and cross your fingers that technology is, taking off to the next level or whatever it's going to be. And you get some hard charger that took as much, love into the case, into the family objectively as the first guy or the second gal or the first gal, whatever. And you just can't do it all, though. You can't stick a watermelon through a keyhole. The volume is way too much out there. And so Greg comes along, others come along, and Greg was the first one out there in the country really to put an organization like this together. And John Douglas was the first executive director, and then John kind of stepped back and now kind of passed the reins 100% to Greg and Dean, and they have been running the organization ever since. But we not only just help law enforcement agencies work through the cases, but we have criteria as to why they would come. And Greg, give or Dean, the two criteria of how we get involved in an active investigation and or an investigation where they want some assistance. The agency has to reach out. It doesn't matter who wants to.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I would say is just clarify a couple of things. So when we started, Greg was the founding executive director, and John actually started as our chairman of the board. So we have a board of directors, and John started there, and then he's now moved to what we call our chair emeritus. So still part of what we do, but so that's kind of just to clarify there. And then I think as far as how we get cases, there are really only three ways and primarily two ways in which a case comes to the foundation. The first would be that a family member would reach out to the foundation and say, look, I have this case. Could you take a look at it? And when that happens, one of the first things that we do is to try to understand what their relationship with law enforcement is, and how involved the case is and what's actually happening with the case. And to be frankly honest with you, and I think it's probably one of the areas that frustrates families sometimes, at the end of the day, if we don't get access to the actual law enforcement documents, the case files, the photographs, all of those things, we're very limited in what we can do and how we can proceed. But we can also help them to understand kind of the process and guide them and give them ideas. But a lot of our time there is spent looking at opportunities to build relationship with the law enforcement agencies to be able to help them and bring resources to the table. The second is for law enforcement agencies to reach out to us and ask us to participate and to provide resources to them. I would tell you that when we first started, I think the majority of the cases that we had coming to the foundation were starting with families. Although one of our first cases actually came through the case that everybody's referring to here is one of our oldest. Actually, someone had reached out to John Douglas and asked him if he could help, and John actually at that point brought it to the foundation. That's how we got involved in it. But I think, you were talking earlier, Chris, about law enforcement, all these great people that they retire and they leave law enforcement. And to me, what I find interesting is here are people at the top of their game who, have trained and taught and done all of these things. And then they get to an age and they go, well, I'm going to retire. And all of a sudden it's like we act like they're gone. They don't have anything, they're not a part of something. And yet here's this tremendous resource that we've had for years. And so that's really where the foundation focused early on, was to say, how do we bring these people who are so smart, have so much information, and bring them together in a network to be able to reach out and help solve these cases. At the same time, nobody wants to work on these cases alone. In other words, it's just too overwhelming. But if we can bring a team together, so we kind of created that atmosphere where we could bring all of these entities together. And so if law enforcement reaches out, and what's exciting today is I would say a large portion of our cases now, and part of that's because of the success we've had, our reputation. And so now we have agencies referring us. And so that makes it a lot easier for us process-wise, because we're able to quickly move through and find out where they are and help where our resources are going to best be served. And then the third way I mentioned is that we do have from time to time, not a lot, but periodically we will have attorneys who will reach out to us because they have a case that they would like us to give a professional opinion on. And so there are a few of those cases where, and we've had some Innocence Project cases, but as I said, those are not our primary cases. Majority of them have been from law enforcement and then from victims' families that have invited us to participate in them. So I don't know, would I miss something, Greg?
No, you did a great job. And Chris, you're familiar with one particular case that's also included in the book. And that is that the primary role that we ended up playing in that, and that was because of your relationship that you had established with both the family, the victim's family, and also the police department, creating a bridge, from a gap that had been created for lack of communication or miscommunications as well. So we don't just provide services either for law enforcement agencies or victims' families of investigative perspectives or investigative resources.
Well, let's give Old Biscuit something to talk about here, and we appreciate the feedback. And you're right. The goal here tonight was to talk about a couple of different things, but so let's. First of all, this guy let's talk a little bit about this shooting in New York City. Okay. And I think it's a good segue into, what you just talked about, Greg. And hypothetically, I said the day it went down, 7 days, they're going to have this guy in custody or at least identified him. And I think we're on day 5 here. Maybe day 6 now. And so I want to hear, first of all, from you guys, what you think about this particular caper. And then I'll give my 2 cents. So who wants to start? Dean? Greg?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is that obviously we've not been read into the case, so we don't have access to a lot of the things. We're like everyone else, kind of looking at what's happening in the news. But I'm impressed with the things that I am reading, seeing. I think people have no idea the manpower that is being used on this case. Whatever you think is happening from an investigative side, I would tell you it's a mere fraction in comparison to that. I think the ability that they've had to track his movement from the time that he came into that area, coming in on the bus, I think it was from Atlanta, and then moving through all of his movement leading up to the shoot and after the shoot, finding the backpack. Some of those things that they found, I know, if we were asked about cases like that, we would be looking at things like touch DNA, anything that this man has touched, where we are today with DNA and the ability to find people through that is mind boggling. And I think it says a lot that they've been able to track him through all of the video surveillance that you have in the community. And I think some of the things that are being said about, there's a few things that you hear out there that you kind of go, well, that's, a lot far beyond just speculation. But I think that it sounds like, as far as an idea of where they're at, knowing, we always talk about in the foundation, the first place we always go back to is victimology. What do we know about the victim? The more we can find out about the victim in this case, the more we're going to understand why that victim was selected, why at that time, what was the motivation behind that. And so those are areas, and it appears that that's exactly what's happening from the investigative side. And I agree with you. I think it's just a matter of time. I think I would be surprised if they don't already have a pretty strong idea, if they don't already know who he is. But then tracking him is going to be another piece of that.
So, just Greg, what are your initial thoughts?
I think it's really important to understand that, as far as what we're getting from the media, is just a surface of most likely what law enforcement knows, what they believe, what they're theorizing about. And the information that we have so far may suggest a certain type of offender, when in fact, some of these things may also, when you start looking at it from a theoretical perspective, may be incidental to some primary relationship that exists between the victim and a possibly another offender that's out there that's not necessarily connected to the killer, except by way of association or relationship that's been established. The answer to this is definitely in the victimology. There's no doubt that the offender was brazen in what they did, very what appears to be organized, more organized to begin with than disorganized, for sure. Was very much aware of the schedule of our victim, what time and place that the crime was committed. That was all pre-selected because they were aware of it. And we know at this point, at least from what we're being told, is that the individual originated in this journey from what was it, Atlanta, correct?
Yeah, Atlanta.
Okay, so that's where it started. Who's in Atlanta? Why Atlanta? And so you have to go back into that victimology and start to identify relationships. But the individual knew before they went to New York, the offender knew before they went to New York what the victim's schedule is going to be. So there's been some pre-planning long before they arrived in New York. And yes, it very well may be, because of the things that we have found out about, it very well may be related to his role in the insurance industry and his particular company that he works with. But I think it's important to recognize, too, that it may not be. That could be a distraction because it makes it so obvious and so clear from those things left behind to conclude, therefore, that it's this when, in fact, it could be something else. And I think we need to keep our minds open to that kind of thing, not make any conclusions yet.
Tom, what's your thought from an investigative reporter?
Yeah, I'm always fascinated by a couple of things because in my experience, being on that side of it, I kind of always look for two things, right? One, am I getting information from the investigating agency? And if I am I also getting phone calls from, other people, right? You're kind of your deep throats, so to speak, right? That are, I'm not going to tell you who I am or, what have you. And I find that as a reporter, as a journalist, that the more conflicting information that I get from sources within the investigating agency, the less organized the investigation is. There's usually some indicates there's usually some infighting or disagreements, and then somebody decides, well, I'm going to go to the media because I don't agree with, my counterpart, etc. In this particular situation, as I read all the articles, I'm not seeing a lot of that. Like everything I'm seeing is, like you guys mentioned, Atlanta, this trail, backpack found in a park, right? Those kinds of things. I saw somebody put this on here, right? The shell casings denied, delayed, deposed. One thing people need to understand is, as members of the media, we understand that the investigating agency releases this information to us so that they can be strategic about the investigation, right? So we know that somehow this individual got on a bus in Atlanta and went up to New York. That wasn't information that the agency gave us willy-nilly, right? They want people to start to, along that trail, to start to kind of, think about, oh, did I see somebody like this? Did I see somebody wearing a mask and a hoodie and, those kinds of things, because they know that the more people that will, divulge information, to Greg and Dean's point, right, the more opportunity that the investigating agency has to start to put together those pieces from a victimology standpoint and see, was it an inside job? Did this, right? Did the assailant personally know the victim? Did they work for him, right? Or maybe it's somebody that's just frustrated from an ideological standpoint. Those kinds of things. But I have been impressed with the investigation so far, because I don't see a lot of like conflicting information out there that's being thrown to different media.
I think one thing, Chris, that strikes me too is that I think agencies struggle sometimes because the general public is just throwing tons of things at them. And so the amount of time that has to be to look at all of those different pieces of possible potential information is frustrating. But the flip side of that is that to Tom's point, when they put out information and they include originated in Atlanta, that also is opening the door for people in Atlanta who might look at that video or the picture of him or see how he moves or whatever, who might say all of a sudden, whoa, wait a minute, I may know this person. And I think, part of it is I was thinking about the Unabomber, for example. I mean, his brother, after seeing pieces of that and the writing, said, whoa, wait a minute. And is the one who actually brought him to the table for the investigators. So there's that tension, I think, always there of saying enough. And we just finished up a chapter for another book that we've been working on. And one of the things we were talking about in that chapter was that a lot of times there's a real hesitancy on law enforcement's part to share details and things with family members or with people. And part of that's because they've gone out and then just shared it in the general public, and it has a very negative effect on the actual investigation. On the flip side of that, though, is that people need to be careful that they're not just sharing crazy theories that all they do is clog up the system and make it 10 times more difficult for investigators. Because if you think about it, you want to cover all the leads. So if you've got 100 leads that you have to sort through and verify and make sure that you're doing it so we're getting the right person. If all of a sudden the system's clogged up with 10,000 leads, you can imagine just the amount of time and energy. And I think that's what we see a lot of times working with agencies. They're just overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that's coming into them from everywhere. So I think if people say, well, how can I really be helpful? Part of it is being very strategic in what you're sharing, but also being willing to share things if you're not sure, but boy, this sounds, at least let somebody else take a look at it. Because I think sometimes we always think the best and we want to, I didn't probably see what I thought, or maybe it wasn't that. And so there's that balance, I think, anytime we look at it from the civilian side of life, of how to really help these things move forward. So,
I think I want to share with our audience. There's a couple of things that are in play here and have been in play from the very first day. I'm going to share with you this particular tab here. So the reason, the public is aware of, how they get the type of information that flows. So at various law enforcement agencies around the United States, there are what they call RTCCs. And what that means is it's a real-time crime center. Okay. NYPD, about 15 years ago, went into a contract with Microsoft. And Microsoft created a program with the now commissioner of NYPD, Jessica Tisch, whose family owns the New York Giants and the Tisch family. Well, she was brought in as the information technology commissioner originally. And what they did is they created what they call the Domain Awareness System, or DAS. Okay, I'm going to show you this tab. And what DAS is DAS is a program that was put together post 9/11 it's a digital mobile platform. And I know this because I've been in that real-time crime center at One Police Plaza multiple times. Okay. And what this platform does is the city took all of the traffic cameras, all of the cameras at Times Square, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they put them all under one, what we would call plate of glass. Okay. And they created a real-time crime center. And that's this here. And you'll see at One Police Plaza, there are analysts, and there are three main areas where these analysts sit. This is one of them, for an example. And this is the RTCC right there. You see Real-Time Crime Center. Okay. Well, what the suspect did not know is that there is technology out there, primarily from Israel, and it's called BriefCam, BRIEFCAM. And what BriefCam does is basically real time, through artificial intelligence, is able to take facial identification and or movement or bags or bicycles, any type of transportation, mobile items, anything that a suspect may use. Okay. And within a minute, the cameras will light up and it will project that image on these types of screens here in front of analysts. So within a minute of that call going down, they were able to reverse and go back and see where the suspect's movements were. And that's how we know he bought a Starbucks and all this other stuff. Okay. So this technology came to be post 9/11. So New York City, one of the things that tells me we're giving them way too much credit, okay, is first of all, a professional assassin does not show up on the streets of New York, okay, and is not aware of the domain awareness system, okay, at all. I mean, you are, I don't know if you went to Fred Flintstone, assassin school or whatever your deal is, but that's the first problem. So I'm going to give my opinion, and then I want to hear what you guys are thinking. Do I think from novel, do I think this is a professional or novice shooter? My opinion is this is an amateur. And he's watched way too many, Call of Duty video games. And that's just my 2 cents right now. And so I want to hear from what you guys think. Greg, Dean, Tom.
No, I agree with you, Chris. I think to begin with, I think there was a perception that he may have been professional simply because of the stance that he took, the timing of the homicide. But keep in mind, if you think about what a professional would do, or just think about which it really requires us as investigators to put ourselves in the position of the offender and also put ourselves in the position of the victim. What would we do in a situation like that? First of all, I would never be seen on camera under that set of circumstances at that particular time in that particular place. If I really knew what the individual's schedule was, I would be able to select a time and a place where the security is such that my exposure to the public is nil to minimum, right? And in this situation, this guy has been seen all over the place. And so, no, I think this guy's just the opposite. He's played games. He's watched a lot of movies. He's got quite a fantasy, if you will, or an imagination. Didn't take a lot of time in preparing for it as a professional. He perceives himself as a professional. He thinks of himself that way in the process. But this is why they've been able to monitor him all the way back to Atlanta.
What do you think about the Monopoly money? What's that game? He's got Monopoly money in the bag.
A lot of times when you're looking and you're attempting to look into the mind of these individuals, there's some things that are there that they do that you don't know. You don't know what they're thinking. And sometimes we have a tendency to think that there is something very conclusive about that he's specifically trying to do something. For example, the bullets that are found, the casings that are found. You got these words that have been etched on those, but etched by a marker. Now, if I was a real professional and I was obsessed with this particular case and this particular individual and that particular message that he's trying to portray, I wouldn't be putting words on those casings with a marker. I would be etching those in where they can't be removed. I would be spending much more time in the planning phases and the theorizing and the imaginative phase, the premeditation, and the obsession with articulating what my message is to whomever it is I'm attempting to convey it to. That marker is as unprofessional as the rest of this situation is. This guy's got dumb luck because he's in a big city. He's riding around on a bicycle. And in my estimation, this is oftentimes the same kind of luck that offenders end up having for one reason or another. And it just takes additional amount of time in order to identify where where the mistakes that are being made and the errors that are being made are going to work in the advantage of the investigators. So your question about monopoly money, what are you thinking about it? I just found out about that here today. I think I heard about it. I'd like to know what the denominations were, et cetera.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, the monopoly money. I mean, there's some great comments in the chat. You know, that UnitedHealthcare was a monopoly, and he was kind of maybe messaging that way. These are fascinating comments, and that's the other thing about what you'll see here in this panel in the Cold Case Foundation, and by this book, by the way, it's coming out, is we don't necessarily always have the answers, but what we do think it comes from a weight of a couple weekends, in this business, and so I think what you mentioned earlier, Greg, the way he was standing, I mean, that's the Weaver stance, right? I mean, it looked like he pretty much had some type of training, but you can get that at your local gun club. Tom, what do you think? You're a thinker.
Yeah, no, well, first of all, I appreciate you calling me a thinker. Hopefully my family's not commenting as we speak, but no, it's interesting. We talk about the messages that the offender is sending, right? The monopoly money, the etched, messages on the bullets. I tend to agree with you, Chris, in terms of when they're going to catch them. I don't think it's going to be too long. Again, this goes back to my experience in having messages put out from law enforcement. There are some very real messages being sent from law enforcement to this offender, right? We know you were in Atlanta. We've got you on video, right? We know you came to New York. We know you're a little bit clumsy, right? Shot in the calf, shot in the back. So we know these things about you, right? And so now, because he is more than likely an amateur, he's going to get very nervous, and he's going to make a mistake, and he's going to get caught. And I think, again, just based on my experience with law enforcement and talking to, folks like Greg and Dean and John Douglas behind the scenes, messages are sent through the media to the offender in a variety of different ways and for a variety of different reasons. But I think in this case, the reason is to scare this guy and into making a big mistake, coming out into the open and being able to catch him by him making that mistake.
Mary Claire's on the book here, or Maria Claire. They're going to have him by Monday. I'm not going to disagree with that. I think they already know who he is.
They could have him under surveillance right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Dean, you're being quiet over there. EF Hutton, let's hear it.
No, I agree with what everybody's been saying. I think what's also interesting too is that you've got these tiny little pieces, and I'm just thinking of how many times we look at cases, and it's so easy to take 3 words written on the side of and then create this humongous amount of detail of what we think it is. I'm struck by the fact that maybe there is something we've just not been aware of it, but if he's doing that and he's got such a message that he wants to send, has he written a manifesto, or has he written in detail, much more detailed than maybe what we're being made aware of as a statement as to what's going on? And I guess back to what we were talking about in the beginning, and that is I honestly think, and this is where we go back, when we get a case and we're stuck, we always go back to the victimology. Every time we go back there, and when we find evidence and it doesn't make sense, we go back to the victimology, because there is a reason why this particular individual was picked, and why he was shot on that day, and that time of day. And it's easy to try to, one of the dangers is that we want to get as much information as we can. It's like, maybe this is a good analogy to give you. Think about a puzzle for a moment. This is a puzzle, but it's not a puzzle that has a lot of detail on it. It just it's all these different pieces. And what we're trying to do is get enough pieces together that at some point we can bring that picture together. And, it's easy if you've got a picture on a puzzle face that's got a lot of different dimensions and colors. My daughter just got a puzzle the other day my wife found for her, and it's a puzzle of a potato chip. And this thing is, I was looking at it the other day. I thought, holy cow, you talk about a nightmare to try to put this dumb thing together. It just looks like, all the pieces look the same. And so now you're having to look at each one of those and do that. And I think what I find happening a lot of times is that we've got 2 or 3 of the pieces to this puzzle. And before you know it, we're filling in all these gaps because, well, then this and this and this. And I think what I would want to communicate to people is we want investigators to get as many pieces of the puzzle, not theories that might fit the puzzle pieces they already have, but the puzzle pieces. Because the more of those they get and the more of them they lay on the table, this thing's going to come together and it's going to make total sense.
This is an interesting thought from Ocean here. They were separated. Did you guys hear that they were the husband and wife? Greg?
I just heard that, I think today. It might have been yesterday. But from the beginning of this thing, I've always thought there's another story line here that needs to be looked at. And it doesn't surprise me. And that's why you got to consider, as I mentioned earlier on today, you got to look at a number of things. We only have a few of those puzzle pieces right now. And that's why we've got to consider the fact that those puzzle pieces either fit into the theory or they don't fit into the theory. And the more puzzle pieces we get, the more accurate our theory becomes. So to begin with, everything is wide open.
Yeah, that could change some of the dynamic, right?
Yeah.
Because
I mentioned to Gary the other night, we were doing some texting about it. And we discussed some of these other possibilities that this could represent. And so I think the observation that's being made there, or the question that's being presented there is something that needs to be considered.
Interesting. One of the things I thought was the fact that he stayed at a youth hostel. I mean, what are your feelings on that? I mean, a professional obviously is not going to check a room out a week before and stay at a youth hostel. I mean, that ain't going to happen. So I think we have to go
not
with
very sophisticated, not what you call
sophisticated of some sort.
Yeah.
He's got a grudge, or the other side of the coin. I think the wife play is a very interesting theory to keep a thought process on. I want to show you this gun that was talked about. This is a brand new, it's called a B&T. And I've heard 2 different things about the type of situation utilized. This is one of them here. Let me blow this up. This was the old spy gun from, back in the World War II days. This is the one everybody was saying that he had. And yet this gun, this piece of equipment, I got to make it shorter here, is what is manufactured right now and available. And that's the other one they think that he could have had. Both of them have a suppressor capability. And what do you think about the type of choice of, you see him, you can't tell if he's got a stovepipe, and if it was a pro, number one, the other thing that you would be looking for is a professional would have to load their own type of ammo.
Yeah.
Right.
Plus, we know that it gets jammed at least twice.
Yeah. Well, but
Doesn't
is it intentional because he's trying to, discard those shell casings with the messaging on them?
Hmm.
Right. But they would have to be a weak load because that's to go through a suppressor like that, you have to, change your grams of gunpowder.
Okay.
I would tell you this, that I'm sure that Francine would love to get her hands on those shell casings
Yeah.
for some
Yeah.
touch DNA,
Yeah.
because the possibility that there's his DNA somewhere on those shell casings is pretty high.
Do you guys think this is obviously is it a statement about the industry? Is it a statement? Is it a grudge? I mean, where are you leaning?
Well, it seems to be a statement and seems to be a grudge. So it's what we would say is most likely it looks to be a personal cause homicide. Or is that a complete distraction? Is
If
it
it's not at
somebody?
staging, right?
Yeah, I mean, is this also the possibility of an individual that just wants to be able to say, look, I can do anything I want, where I want, when I want, to whom I want. Some of these other things may or could be misleading because they seem so obvious. That's what takes it away from the professional individual for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say, and Dean's kind of mentioned the Unabomber case a couple of times. When I was a reporter in the Sacramento area, it was a timber lobbyist in that area that was a Unabomber's last victim. And as it turned out, he lived 6 blocks away from me at that time. And the interesting thing about that is I was, writing articles and talking to different people and different experts, et cetera. What continued to come up was that, this individual had a grudge, was angry, wanted to make a statement. I don't think that's a big secret or revelation about the Unabomber, but I think when you look at this case and you tie the two together, I think we're probably going to find that when they catch this individual, they'll find he probably doesn't have as high a level of intelligence as Ted Kaczynski had, but that he did have a high level of angst, anger toward that. I would not be surprised to see that there is some personal experience that involved a loved one or a family member with this individual that set him off. That probably maybe the healthcare system contributed to the decline in this loved one's health. I just wouldn't be surprised to see that, but definitely there's some anger. Something set him off. The other thing I do want to mention just really quickly, Greg kind of brought it up. The level of planning suggests to me that it was very low. So we tend to when emotions are high, right, intelligence is low, and so I wonder too if this was planned at a very low level because the emotions got the best of the offender, and he just, I'm going to plan this out, I'm going to go do it. He got some information as to where the CEO might be, and he just kind of went for it. So
it was interesting. Denise just made the comment. She said, are we making it too complicated? And I think going back to something Greg said early on, and that is that this is, it may not be near as complex as people are trying to make it out to be. And the analogy that I like to use a lot of times with people is that in so many cases, and I think some of this maybe comes from, we're also exposed to TV and to movies and these twists and turns and, all these surprising moments. And I think what's really the reality is that oftentimes the evidence is it's going to flow just like water. And where we get in trouble every time we turn around is when we start damming it up and trying to hold it in a certain spot to fit our little theory. And, if you walk in and throw water in a garage and watch it, where all the low spots are. It will flow to those spots, and that's where it is. And cases like this, a lot of times, I understand it, it's exciting to get involved and talk, and it makes for a good adventure for all of us in our minds and things. But oftentimes these cases are very simplistic, and I think Greg used the word. Sometimes people just get either lucky or unlucky, and I think we're always kind of amazed at some of the cases that we go through and go, man, that was just a couple of things aligned at just the right moment. It made it look like something, but it really wasn't. It really was just this simple. And I always feel more comfortable where we keep things as simple as possible and let them become more complicated as the evidence is there, rather than, I think a lot of times we make things far more complicated, far more interdependent, and all these conspiracies and all these different things. And boy, that's a lot of moving parts. And sometimes it's fun to think that way, I guess, but it doesn't help the actual investigation most of the time.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I mean, how many times have we gone and looked at crime scene photos and gone, what have you guys thought about this? And they go, what?
Yeah.
That right there.
Little thing right there.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, is this, I think one of the things that's really interesting, I mean, the evidence that we know that's even out there right now in the public domain is we have a timeline.
Yeah.
We know the guys, probably originated in Atlanta, took the Greyhound. So, he's watched a couple of movies and he got a fake ID, paid in cash. But by golly, Ed had a flirt right there.
Yeah, that's right. It just got lucky.
Had to pull the mask down and flirt. Go ahead.
I mean, even the mask that he's wearing. I mean, you could see this guy without the mask, look at him with a mask, and say, same guy. It's very clear. He's got very distinct nose, very distinct eyes. Another meager attempt to conceal himself.
Yeah, and as Shantae Inferno says, suspect is only human. That's exactly right. I mean, he did have a pretty good plan. I mean, he got out of Dodge pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, I know folks are asking about the, the car that's there. The taillights come on at about the same time the victim is perpendicular with the vehicle. And of course the internet went nuts. Is that a signal, to to the shooter that this is the guy? Go get him. And he's on the phone. And I love this. The next Netflix series.
Yeah, there you go.
And a lot of times,
the conclusion before that happens.
I will put money on it tonight. Just my personal opinion. You guys tell me what you think. I think they know who he is.
Yeah,
I think they've got him pinned down. I mean, you're riding a bicycle away from a hit. And then you're dropping a bag of Monopoly money.
Yeah.
You're probably throwing the gun in the pond. That's where the cops were all day diving.
Yeah.
And, they got you getting on a taxi and they got you getting on a bus. And they've got you at the bus station in Atlanta that they're not talking about.
Yeah.
And just like Koberger, I mean, they were sitting on Koberger's house for a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, you know, they're waiting for Pretzel Boy here to do the next move, and then they're gonna
Sure.
once they get him nailed down with a little DNA.
Yeah, I really wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't a bit more simple than it appears to be.
Yeah. Solved. Pam, potato chip puzzle. That's classic, Pam. Thank you so much. Okay, I got a couple of questions in here. I want to put them up for us. And this goes to can volunteers, CM Kathy, can us average folks who were not law enforcement volunteer to assist in the Cold Case Foundation?
Yeah, we encourage you, if you have an interest in participating with us at any level, we encourage you to let us know. Contact us through our website. We have a contact form that you'd fill out and just submit to us. And we'll follow up.
And I'm just going to put this up because I love Lebanese food. Thanks, Ziggy. Okay, the next one here is how long are DMV photos kept? And I will say they're sitting on a server somewhere.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies utilize them for 6-packs, i.e. photo lineups.
Yeah.
There are companies out there that actually get them from the government after a certain amount of years. And let me get to the next one here. Well, this is more of a statement, but I'm not going to put this one up. That's kind of interesting. Let's see here. Under statute, NYPD can't access DMV photos. Okay, that's New York. But they have them already on the domain awareness system, so they don't need the DMV photo. That's that system we were talking about a little bit earlier. Do you think he has an accomplice? Anybody?
I think there's somebody else that has information. Yeah, whether it's it just depends on what the primary motivation is here. There's a reason and rationale behind it, and this guy's not the only source of information. He's not by himself on this, most likely. That he's talked to somebody, he's made a statement. If it is a statement that he's trying to make, he's complained. He's voiced an opinion about the insurance industry, about either his victimization or victimization of somebody close to him, or the state of affairs of the industry, if that's what it is.
Dean, what's your opinion?
Yeah, I think that there's a difference again between somebody being in on it and two people planning a job together and both in cahoots with something. I think here again, every time you add another person, you add so many layers to things. I'm not saying that's not possible, but I think to Greg's point, there are people out there that maybe didn't think he was serious about it, that he's talked to, or that have sat around, and he may be the one guy in the group of people griping about something who said, I'm going to show you guys how it's done. And they're all now sitting there going, holy crap, I didn't think he'd go through with it. You could have that type of scenario. And I'm not saying it's not possible, but, conspiracies, for example, to get a number of people from a lot of different places to agree and then to hold that confidence is tough. It just really is tough long term, and you've got to look at, well, what would cause somebody to keep something that quiet. So,
Tom?
Yeah, I kind of go back to what I said before about law enforcement sending him a message, right, by releasing the information in the way that they have and in the time that they have. I think they're also sending a message to anybody who might have known I do agree with Greg and Dean. I don't know that there's somebody that he planned it with that, helped him out like a McVeigh or Nichols situation with the Oklahoma City bombing. But there's probably somebody that knew about it, whether they intentionally knew about it or kind of, to Dean's point, thought he was just blowing off steam. That's the question. But I think, to hold that, the authorities are basically saying, hey, we kind of know who this is. If you've got some information, you better come forward or you might be held complicit, right?
Greg, what do you think? What are you thinking? I can see your gears going.
Gary, I think, just posed a question, which I think, I don't know if you noticed that it popped up. Gary B, I think, came up about other communications that he, if he is the individual that's got an issue and a grudge, would he have written complaints to the company? Do you think they're looking for complaints, letters, and emails? I can't imagine that. Certainly. Absolutely. I agree. Gary, if this guy does have a grudge, this has been grueling for quite a while. It wouldn't be surprising that he would have sent something, made phone calls, left messages of complaint, some type of a correspondence.
So what's your overall thought process on, the guy, obviously he took he had some type of help. He buys a gun up in Connecticut. That's, I think, where the ATF traced the gun.
Well,
he gets on a bus in Atlanta, but somehow he's got to cross that gun to the bus depot, or he's got to go to Connecticut and get it. He comes in a week early, goes to a youth hostel, pays cash, yet he's sloppy enough to show his face. And then he's scoping out the morning of. He may or may not have left a burner phone. That's still, I think, up in the air.
Yeah.
Right. Some people are reporting it has, and I've seen other reports that he hasn't. But even if he left a burner phone, that in of itself is going to be a dumb move.
Yeah. And what was do we know that when the victim arrived and how long he'd been in town in anticipation of this presentation he was going to give that morning?
I think he arrived the day before.
Just the day before.
Yeah.
So it's apparent. It'd be interesting to try to understand how he found out where he was staying and that he would have shown up. Now, he was going to give the presentation that morning, correct? It was the first presentation up. So how far was he? Was that the hotel that he had just exited on his way to give the presentation?
No, that he had come from his hotel and he was going to that one.
Yeah.
To give the presentation.
How far was his hotel from that location? Do you know?
Yeah, hang on. I can tell you here in a minute. Let me pull it up on this screen here.
Yeah, because that would be interesting to know what kind of advertisement and stuff, what promotional material was out there about him speaking there. Because if that's
across the street,
just across the street.
Yeah. So at 6:44, the victim is walking along towards the New York Hilton Midtown after exiting his hotel across the street. The shooter is lying in wait alongside the building. And then, so basically he comes across the street, he's walking to the other hotel, and the shooter takes him out.
Now, is that the building he's lying in wait, or the building where he was headed to go make the speech? Is that?
Yes.
So like a Hinckley situation, right? He didn't have to, he just knew where he was going to be showing up because he knew when the speaking was. So Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, so the shooter shows up before him and stays at that hostel.
How far is the hostel? Do we know from that location?
It's a couple blocks. It's not very far.
That would
Yeah. I think everybody agrees that the shooter had inside information, and the shooter was there 10 days before, which is an amateur.
Yeah.
A professional would not show up. Right, Greg? I mean, anybody?
Yeah, that's too long. Because they put themselves in a high risk situation of being seen, something happening within that 10-day period to attract attention. Anywhere from getting in a conflict with somebody or getting in an accident or drawing the attention of either the public or police. That's a long time to be there, and putting themselves at that level of risk that nothing is going to happen between the time I get there and the time this individual, my target, if you will, shows up at that particular location and time in the morning.
Yeah. See, if that statement there's correct, that he was speaking to 800 people that morning and it wasn't secret, then, if he's following, you think of a lot of people that speak on a regular basis, it's pretty easy to kind of see where they're going to be, when they're going to be speaking, if they're the keynote speaker of an event or if they're on the speaker's list. That doesn't make it that complicated. Now, if it was, nobody knew he was going to be there, that changes that dynamic. But if this is something that was out there fairly regularly or easily obtained by people, then that again goes to show that he wasn't sure when he was coming there, but he had to be in position to know. He didn't maybe have as much detail. A professional would try to have everything much more locked in. And to Greg's point earlier, limit their risk. I mean, this guy, so many of his things that he did raised his risk level. It didn't reduce it. So
even the fact that the hostel that was noted there was like 30 blocks away.
That's what they're saying.
Yeah,
this guy's not going to kill himself.
No. 30 blocks away. Well, now we know why he's on a bike, because it's too far to walk. But is a bike a safe, low risk type of transportation under that set of circumstances? No, not at all. That's potentially high risk, other than that you've got minimal traffic compared to middle of the day, for example. So that decreases his risk level.
And where'd he get the bike? Right? I mean, whose bike was it? Where did he get the actual bike?
It's a local rental.
He rented it
right there on the street. You can rent
on the street rental. Okay.
Street rental. Yeah, you just hit it with a.
So I wonder if they know where that bike was picked up from when he did with it, if that's the case.
Yeah.
How far away was it picked up from the location?
They can
just
pull out
your questions.
Yeah, that's where I think they already know his name. I mean, they got him. It's just a matter of, okay, we got to find him.
Yeah.
And I think that will happen within the next 48 hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially you've got everybody and their mother involved. I mean, you've got U.S. Marshals now. You've got the fugitive apprehension team from, NYPD.
Sure.
You've got the feds involved. You've got, all kinds of craziness. I remember I had a caper one time where I was in South Carolina on something, and a buddy of mine, Chris, if you're listening, Chris Dukes, shout out to Chris Dukes, NYPD. Anyway, he calls me up and he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Who is this?" He goes, "It's Dukes." I said, "What are you doing here?" He goes, "Oh, we just took a guy down. Remember the guy during the riots that ran over the sergeant, and they run him over."
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that suspect fled to South Carolina, and they sent a plane, a helicopter, and a team to go get this guy, and they found him. And after they were all done, Dukes is like, hey, you know any good restaurants? Can you meet me in Myrtle Beach? Because that's where they were. I go, dude, what the heck, over? He goes, yeah, come on over. And so, Chris, if you're listening, I just told our story. I got a couple of good pictures with the whole team, but they have a whole organ. They're like LAPD. I mean, just those guys show up. And I'm going to tell one more war story, if that's okay.
Please.
Did I ever tell you the time when we get a call of shots fired, and we end up, showing up at the end of the city, and there's one guy standing there in a plain wrapper, an undercover car. And we're like, who are you? He goes, LAPD. Okay. Hey, did you guys hear any gunshots? Yeah, we shot a guy. Well, okay. Where is he? Oh, we put him in the helicopter and hauled him off. He's getting medical right now. We're like, let me get this right. You just shot a guy, threw him in a helicopter that you guys have? Yeah, we have actually 2 helicopters, and we had a shoot team here too, so we're good. Your code for it right here is a showcasing if you guys need to look into things. And I'm like, holy crap. But same principle. And so I think they're probably sitting in this guy, they're sitting outside smoking a couple of cigarettes, just waiting, throwing them out the window, just waiting for home fries to come out of his house before they take him at some point. But any other thoughts on this one? I've had you here for an hour and 42 minutes. And by the way, if anybody is just joining us, I want to play this real fast.
On Amazon and thecoldcasestore.com.
Okay, so I'm going to play it from the beginning.
Now available from Greg Cooper, the Cold Case Foundation. The true story of how a group of experts work with law enforcement to solve cold cases. Available on Amazon and thecoldcasestore.com.
Okay, so that's
hit the big time.
That's our in-house production for the book here. We guys and gals, if you're just joining us, please. This is a brand new book that just came out. You can pre-order it now on Amazon. They ship on Tuesday. There's also a audio version coming out. And Tom, who is the voice on the audio version?
Oh, yeah. It's a gentleman by the name of, I want to get it right, Rick Adamson. So he's voiced about 200 books. We're very grateful that he agreed to do this with us, but he's voiced some prominent books. Probably the one that most people have heard about is the book that's based on the Toohey family from the movie The Blind Side. So, and he's I think he's been nominated for a Grammy for his narration. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Nice. None of us could have done that.
I've been clearing my throat too many times. Yeah.
I love Jim Bond. He always comes up with these, do you think he has a history of crime? Anybody?
Yeah, I think he probably has some kind of nuisance type of history, criminal history. But in terms of serious criminal history, I wouldn't be surprised that he doesn't have one.
Yeah, the guy's not traveling the world whacking people for a living.
No.
If he is, then he's the potato chip that is in that pot.
Yeah.
He's not going to be hard to figure out. Okay, any closing thoughts, gentlemen, before we say aloha to everybody? And
thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Love you guys.
Thank you to the viewers. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you being on board with us tonight.
We really appreciate it. You guys ready to go to Hawaii?
Yep.
Let's go.
Let's go. Here we go.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, yeah. special memories. Together, I'll be your company, now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place, feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. With you, Hawaii. I need a summer breeze, some fresh air to put my mind at ease. No cares. You wanna come with me? Me and you go to our favorite tree. Are you ready now? We jump on a plane now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. Don't hesitate now. We're taking away. Yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down. We're going away. Yeah, we're going away. You and me. Feeling the sun on my face in a while.